Digital Leaders Boardroom, and today we're going to talk with digital leaders how to embrace technology to develop a digital first strategy. Let's dive in. Hello, this is number 2 of the sequence of the Digital Leaders Boardroom, and today we're going to talk about integrating the digital ecosystems. And of course I do that with great digital leaders at this table. Let me introduce you, as always, in short, Orla from Equinix, Astrid from SVB, and I will explain it later on what the social insurance bank will be and with. I've got Gelmer, and that's the right announcement, I guess, from PwC. And I got Dave from OBS, and that stands for Orange Business Services. So let's be welcome and have a great conversation on this topic, because integrating with digital ecosystems is, I think, a hot topic on the plate for a lot of CEOs, CDOs, CTOs at this stage, a lot of organizations. To set the scene before we go into discussion, Gelmer, can you shine some light on this, on the basic trends, or well, what you would see as well, these are the topics to handle in this case, as a kind of setting the scene.
Yeah, so let me do that. I think when we think about digital ecosystems, and especially what is changing now, what is new, then I would say the aim to which we use them is the thing that is changing. So for most of the companies, being digital is a requisite now. Most of people do that. But then up until now, we saw that many companies were actually busy digitizing their current business. So what they do, making that more efficient. And I think the big change now is that we see fundamental shifts in the value model. And I would say that that's very new. The strategy end part of PwC conducted some research, researched a dozen companies around the globe, which were actually nominated by their industry peers as being companies that were ahead of the change, beyond digital as they call it, and there's also a nice booklet about that, it's called. And I think what they found there were 3 sets of leadership imperatives, things to do to get right. And one of those sets I actually would like to share with you, because that's particularly relevant to the discussion of today.
Right, so let's get that slide up. Yep, there it is.
So I think looking at what they all do and what they all do right is, first of all, really reimagining their place in the world. What are the problems we want to solve, not only today, but also tomorrow, to continue to be successful? They embrace and they create value through ecosystems, which is a bit more than just procurement or connecting vendors to a platform. And they build a system of what we call privileged insights. So that's the type of data that you don't have public access to, but that is really important to really understand client needs. And if I would illustrate that maybe with one example, one that's close by, but also a really nice example, to be honest, that would be Philips. I think up until about 10 years ago, that was a company that was great in lighting. Everybody knows them from that, but also consumer electronics, and finally in health equipment. But then they asked themselves the question, so where do we really want to be in a number of years? What do we want to do? And they decided they wanted to make the world a healthier place, basically. Impact not only millions, but even billions of people, and really do that. So that was a bold strategy, because it meant they had to sell off the other parts of the business. They really had to organize around customer domains. And what they saw is that they needed other capabilities. So that ecosystem part, they needed partners, technology partners, to build a health suite platform and to really step change the use of IoT, but also channel partners. You can think then of groups of hospitals to really get an insight in how that all connects. So that health continuum, if you will, from healthy living, prevention to diagnose, to treatment, to aftercare, that all interacts. And if you want to create integrated solutions for your clients, and that is their aim, they want to have their revenue in coming years to be from solutions, then you need to understand how that interacts. And I think that's the privileged insight. And you will only get those data if you're very clear about what you're going to do with it, and if you're very clear about how you will treat those data. So customers and your partners need to understand what you use it for, that it's beneficial for them. They also need to understand that you will treat those data carefully.
So that also means that your digital ecosystem should be interconnected, right?
Yeah, very much.
All right, and you have a slide with that to explain that, and just explain to me in short, where is the principle behind it?
I think that when you think about ecosystems, people oftentimes immediately think about platforms, and it can be that, in all honesty. It can be a marketplace where partners connect, but it can be more. So we also see ecosystems around service orchestration or integration, hospitals again being a great example. And we also see ecosystems that are very much oriented at innovation in energy, in automotive, where you really want to aim for breakthrough technologies. And then when it comes to what is an ecosystem exactly, there are many definitions and everybody probably has its own. But I think two key elements in there is that it's about an interconnected set of offerings or capabilities, if you will, on the one end, and that it's about an integrated client experience on the other end. Almost all definitions have that in common.
All right. Thanks, Gelmer. So let's start here, and let's first start with some strategic challenges. So let's peel up the onion, so to speak. So what are the dynamics today, and then go into the role of the ecosystems and how to play that role and how to enable that ecosystems, and then of course leadership to top it off, right? Because in the end we need to do it, right, from a leadership perspective. So let me ask the question to you first. The strategic challenges of SVB, and perhaps to explain SVB, Social Insurances Bank, so to speak, as being a outlet of the government, in a certain way. What are the strategic challenges for you, Astrid, today?
Well, at SVB we're an independent body executing different regulations. And we do this for over hundreds of years. So it's become complex, the regulation and the execution of this. This on the one hand, I recognize what you're saying. We're still digitalizing, we're highly digitalized. We're still digitalizing old paper processes. Mm-hmm. That's a bit already exaggerated, but in short, that's the case. But customer needs or public needs are really changing. We need to be open, transparent, inform our 5.7 million customers what they are entitled to from our regulations, and that's become complex. But it has to be open, transparent, and doable for customers to ask for what's needed, and we have to inform them about this. There is a political climate in which we can really simplify these regulations, but we need, on one hand, a lot of continuity to keep the store open. 50 billion euros payment a year that needs to be done still. And on the other hand, we have to face customer needs, public needs, to be agile, to simplify regulations, do suggestion to politics about this. And in an agile way, being able to change that in our complex IT landscape nowadays.
Yeah. And a complex political landscape or stakeholder management landscape, so to speak.
And there are a lot of opportunities there. There's also asked of us to act being several governmental bodies or organizations to work together to be one government for our public. but for example, not able to exchange all the information that's needed for that. So that also adds up to certain challenges in data exchange or usage. Also being able to do suggestions for, again, making regulations more simple, more doable for people, and more fitting to people nowadays.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you looked at, Dave, similar discussions with your customers within OBS, Orange Business Services, and especially that robust versus flexible, transparent versus stakeholder management.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. That's what we see in the market. I think after the pandemic, innovation has increased. The need of innovation has increased. So customers are struggling with customer experience. Their customers are more demanding. Their own employees, the experience, and also the operational part, the industry, the connected factories, whatever. So all these three come together, and they have to keep pace of innovation. And the flip of the coin is that they need the stability there as well. So that's very difficult for them. And I think if you look at the Dutch public sector, they have to be the trusted partner of the Dutch citizens. Yeah. So I think for them it's extra complex. It's adding complexity.
Right. So if I may take that to you, Orla. So what are the insights of Equinix on this, and why do you think digital ecosystems are that important? That we spend the whole program on it, right?
That's right, indeed. And I think everything that our guests have said is absolutely spot on. We see those trends. We see them across industries, whether it's automotive, omni-channel retail. You see it everywhere, public sector indeed. You see it happening. You see that demand to take these digital technologies that are now, dominating within organizations, but they have to be managed in a certain way. So the C-level, for executive boards, driving that, managing ecosystems to help you do that and to have that co-creation of value, if you are going to remain competitive, is very key. And we see that in many ways. So we see a lot of organizations, both our customers and our partners, that are actually looking for new ecosystems to really help them achieve on those goals. Because I think there's a good realization now that we cannot do it alone, that we are better together when we pool the resources of multiple organizations together who are playing to their strengths. And so we see that happening in order to achieve those goals. And as I was listening, the example of PayPal came to mind. PayPal, obviously, very much a digital company globally, and they talk about how, for them, it entails three things. So kind of really looking at, how do you have a robust infrastructure so that you can actually handle the innovation and the digital technologies that you need. And some people are further along that journey than others, and I think that's very common in the industry. How do you do that securely? So the trust, the security, how do you make sure you can monitor that constantly? And then how do you drive a consistency of user experience around the world very often, particularly when you are subject to so many different regulations, and you have to deliver on the user experience but respect those regulations as well. So what we see is, to do that, people are gravitating much more towards ecosystems to leverage the competencies of the best in the market or the best organizations there to help you achieve that.
And if you look to that from a point of strategic choices, Gelmer, you could say there's a lot of growth of ecosystems because we have pain, right? Mm-hmm. But if you take that from a point of view of gain, opportunity-wise, are ecosystems the answer on, if you have a more holistic view on your strategic digital transformation as a whole? Or do you say, well, that goes too far?
No, I think it is, because if you look at the benefits, then if you ask that question, what is the benefit of an ecosystem? Often the first thing that comes to mind is specialized skills, technology, access to market, probably all true. But I think, coming back to the earlier discussion, so if you ask me, the true value is oftentimes in, do we really understand our place in the world, what we want to do? Because if you understand that, you understand which capabilities you need to build. the ones that you can build yourself and the ones that you need from an ecosystem. I think the world is growing complex, right? It's no longer just about making money. It's you also as a leader have to fulfill the sustainability goals. You see that dependencies are growing much bigger. So it's almost undoable to build all those capabilities by yourself. So I think it can actually have value to do that together with partners.
Yep. And if you bring that, Astrid, to that SVB, in terms of do it your own versus what do you do within your ecosystem?
Yeah.
We have had a discussion previously about that tech push and market pull, right?
Yeah.
So how important is that ecosystem, and how do you embrace that, or how do you facilitate it, or even maybe control it?
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with being very explicit in your ambition. You have a strategic ambition as a company, and that needs to be specific in the terms of value. You refer to that also. And for me, in my position, it's very important to be able to ask my business, what's really your business pool? Because the pool is there. Poverty reduction is something we contribute to. We want to reduce the non-usage of certain regulation for people who really, really need the support. There is poverty in Holland, and so there's really a business pool to help these people. And there's a technology push, multi-party computation, which was there. And combining these, so really asking business, what's the value you want to reach, when and how? Think big, act small, and help an ecosystem who helps you take small steps, explore together. I think that's the biggest opportunity, and my role there is to specify and to connect business challenges and technology push, because it's good to have technology push, but they have to become solutions for business.
Well, in a certain way, you see that discussion popping up even more and more. Technology equals business. What does it bring? Does it bring total new concept, etc.? So let's look at let's say a little Moody.
We're taught that 1 + 1 = 2. Simple, right? But today's world isn't simple. So, what happens if we look at it from a new angle? Could we make something greater? If we bring together human ingenuity, passion, and experience with the latest technology, we start to make something more. Something we can see in people's lives and feel in the world around them. Building trust for today and tomorrow. And that's the thing. We all know the math. But we need a new way to put it together. Which means we don't just find answers. We never stop looking for them. A passionate community of solvers, coming together in unexpected ways, creating new solutions for a new day. That's the new equation.
So Gelmar, what problems, in a certain way, do ecosystems in general solve?
They solve a great many problems. I think in the end, they solve the capability problem. So to give an example, if you look at one of our clients, Oleander, electricity grid operator, they are responsible for delivering that electricity, right? And I think we've all seen the news where there are items around how our increased usage and also the fact that we want that from sustainable sources put some constraints on the net. So they're working very hard together with the other grid operators to resolve that in many ways. But one that I particularly like is around local energy exchange. So the idea there is, why not try to increasingly use the energy when and where it is actually there? But to do that, you need products, services, so new capabilities, even in their regulated business, things that they sometimes cannot deliver. But they do have all the insights and they do have all the data that you need to make that work. So they are actually engaging now in a consultation and a co-creation to work with market parties and to put one and two together and actually further that and create solutions for that.
Right, but that would also ask me the question, Dave, in this case, before I turn also to Orla in this sense. So what challenges does it bring to all the players within the ecosystems? And how can we bridge those, right?
I think quite a lot, to be honest. It's been said on this table that sometimes you have to reinvent yourself as a player as well. So services that were successful in the past, sometimes they go to the cloud, they go to hyperscalers. So you need to reinvent yourself and be willing to reinvent yourself. So it's also about the culture aspect. So it's about new players coming in, like from the energy that Helmer said, new players coming in from the digital transformation, from the factories, etc., new ecosystem players, and you all have to combine them. So it's about creating new connections and maybe letting go of old as well. And sometimes that's about reinventing yourself, and as we know, that's not always easy.
Right.
And how do we do to bridge that gap? That was the second question. I think sometimes a marketplace to make sure that you create as a partner building bricks like Lego to make sure that they can put into place with other services partners, to have that as your vision. And if that's your vision, then it becomes easy consumable for the business outcomes that some customers need for you.
And is Lego then still good enough, or do we need modular?
Yeah, I think the way we compose our services and how composable that is, I think that's a big question. I think we didn't solve it yet, but we're on our way.
And if you look at it from a digital infrastructure perspective, Orla, so what do businesses need to innovate and stay competitive there?
Yeah,
because that's your domain, right?
Indeed, indeed. Well, what we see every day is again very much people reimagining how their business should be. Sometimes walking away from old practices and embracing new practices or new ideas and innovations, and that brings its own challenges. So very often what we see is people understand that in order to develop that ecosystem, they need also proximity to those businesses, those service providers that will help them do that. So Equinix very often focuses on how do you bring people together within those ecosystems, and we house many ecosystems within on our platform and within our data centers around the world. I think it's also about understanding when you bring various organizations together to form an ecosystem. And we sometimes talk about the power of three or the power of many. It's trying to understand what specific value are you bringing. And I think it goes back to both Helmer and Astrid talked about you need to know your purpose. If you know your purpose, then the ecosystem can really help define what is the value I bring, what is the value that you bring, so that overall you co-create whatever that new value is. A little bit like the example you gave, which I think is an excellent one, which is where on your own, you cannot reimagine the possible, but together it suddenly becomes something that you can do for the greater good. So the energy example, I think, is very topical and a good one.
Yeah, besides the fact that you can have, I think, another 10 broadcasts about purpose-led and what does it mean in terms of change and operating models and etc. But let's stick in terms of that ecosystem and especially the digital ecosystem. So what technology is really needed to make it all work together? So what are you seeing the big trends there? So we've seen experiences of cloud, we've seen AI, but what are the true technologies to make this collaboration work, right?
I was tempted to say Equinix and SAP, which is a joke, of course, although they can be really helpful, I think. I don't think there's one answer there. So I think it is about orchestrating that technology. And basically, it's about whatever works to make it an integrated client experience. And then the technology that you need for that can take many shapes or forms depending on the organizations that you have. Where I do, you triggered me in the conversation about shaping those ecosystems and how they work together, because that is something where I also see sort of a mind shift change about, at first, everybody wants to extract value from an ecosystem. But if you go about and cooperate, and I don't know your experience, Astrid, but everybody wants to extract, it's going to fall apart. So at some point, you also need to be able to put value in. And sometimes at first that might seem like competitive data that you're actually opening up to the public. But in many cases, what you get back is far more valuable than what you put in. But you need that willingness to invest in your partnership.
Yeah. So, and if I ask you that, Astrid, in terms of the type of partnerships, so we see, and you already discussed, we see platforms, we see ecosystems, we see do-it-yourself, we see outsourcing, we see numerous, right?
Yeah.
Multi-vendor, even multi-public cloud strategies,
yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
So, in your case,
Yeah. Yeah.
preferable?
Well, it's an ecosystem, right? So I think it needs to be open for growth, because you don't know where you're heading at in 10 years. We all don't know what are the possibilities then, and what are the customer needs then. I think for organizations like us, we are responsible in the end for delivering the service. So what we are now in a certain stage of complexity, technical depth, and we need to get out. So we need short-term, mid-term, and long-term planning. And I think the ecosystem, short-term, we know what we have to do. Mid-term also, long-term, that needs openness and growth towards solutions and customer needs, bringing them together in what is needed in the future. We don't know what. And I think the ecosystem we needs to help getting us through those short, mid-term, and long-term stages.
Right. So, but if you have then a discussion where you need within those 3 windows, and I don't call it horizons, I really see it as steps, 3 window steps. So you see a lot of discussions going from where do I need my back end or where do I need my front end, right?
Yeah.
So UWV, for example, said, well, we have our payment system is rock solid.
Yeah.
Don't change. Go at the front end, right? Customer experience. Eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that work for you in conjunction with the fact that there is some, let's say, that civil payment perspective is pushing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All the stakeholders are pushing, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a very...
But still, you have a robust system.
Yeah, yeah. And it still needs to be re-architectured, etc., serviced in a different way, facing the challenges of the future. So think big, act small. Yes, we're taking small steps in discovering ourselves with our partners, how to make this robust system having the values continuity and agility for the future. Still keeping the store open. So that's a challenge. It's a fantastic challenge, by the way.
Right.
And I think, we're facing it and we're picking it up with our partners, because they have done it before at different places. But we ourselves have the knowledge about the regulations, our business. So I really pick up your what you're saying. It's about reinventing yourself also. At our case, and we have to reinvent ourselves in the core competencies, knowing our regulations, knowing our own support processes, business processes, being able to pick them up in a new way, new business models. And that's reinventing ourselves in our case, and using the market ecosystems in what they are good at.
No.
making new technology solutions together.
So the cultural aspect is important.
Yeah, it's
to really have also partners that are able to reinvent themselves as well, so that you can really look at what really the business outcomes in this case for you are, and how to add to that together.
Yeah.
But then given the importance of continuity in your case, if you work with those partners, how do you look at topics like security, which is always, I think, high on the agenda, but takes perhaps a bit different shape here?
Yeah. Well, that's a very challenging one, because we have to keep up with security with the complexity we're in now. And at the same time, I always say I need to have the specification on what helps now and what helps in the future. Yeah. So the only way for us to go in technical renewing our platforms, for example, because then we can take bigger steps in hiring our cybersecurity. So it's choosing, and also dialogue with the business, being able to really specify risks, for example.
Yeah. Indeed.
Because they're into it at the same time.
It's a bit of a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
So the business often sees the value of working with others, and then also sees the importance of securing that.
Yeah.
And I think a general trend is that it goes more from ex-post audits to continuous monitoring. But then oftentimes the risk and compliance department still takes sort of the legal boundary of the organization as the parameter for security. Whereas if you breach one and you work in an ecosystem, you breach all, right? So if you do a red test, you should actually do it on an ecosystem level.
Yeah.
But
how do we address that?
Depend on interconnectedness, and that's something that obviously at Equinix we understand very well. But how do you make sure that that interconnectedness doesn't bring risk? It actually secures and allows the ecosystem to interact. That becomes, I think, very powerful. And I when you do look at an ecosystem, I think what we're seeing is there are new requirements that are new basics, and security is one, sustainability is another, because these are elements that are now not nice to have, but they are non-negotiable within how we design our systems for the future and how we future-proof them. So it is a very interesting time. You need to do that in addition to the long list of things that you have to do to transform your organization and keep the lights on while you do it.
But from a technical point of view, you would say, okay, we've seen that interconnectivity, collaboration, etc. But now from a using perspective or user perspective, you see now suddenly also increase of the usage of the data itself, right?
That's right.
Because suddenly we want to share much more, right? So how do we handle that?
Well, I think what we see, you have to handle it securely for sure, but what we're seeing is a trend then towards developing infrastructure in a very different way. So it's becoming much more distributed, not a lot less centralized. So that in and of itself is a significant shift for organizations. And then it's also going a lot to the edge, bringing the data much closer to where the user is to improve that user experience, to improve speed and performance. And yes, it all has to be secure. So you need to do that in a secure way. So it's from the centralized to a much more distributed kind of oriented or architecture, much more interconnected. So that is the journey, and to do that you need service providers, you need an ecosystem of players that can help you achieve that and have the competency to allow you to build that kind of robust infrastructure so you can get on with the business of innovating and driving all of the transformation you need to drive. So it's becoming a fundamental part of how you reimagine your systems to drive the business of the future.
But it also means that distributed infrastructure will come in place even more. Indeed. If you will say distributed data, distributed value chains, etc. Right?
Correct.
So that's a whole new league. Different league.
I think it is. I mean, that's a trick. Sort of how do you get data to the edges and usable for everybody? And then I think in essence you could say, if you have large international companies now with a big supply chain, they also have these issues, right? How do we get aligned on the semantics, on data, on legal issues, on organizational, on technical, getting it distributed across the network? If you turn to an ecosystem, you basically up that challenge because you cross organizational boundaries, but you still need to do that.
Right.
So I think getting the semantics right and getting the technology right are key there.
You see a lot of discussions there, Dave, on the cross-border.
Yeah, we see a lot, of course, also with the political change indeed, European legislation that's coming different as well. So we see who's owning the data. So is the data from the supplier or the customer who uses it or the end customer? So that's becoming more complex by the day, I think. And if you look at the security part, I think all partners in the ecosystem, like the technology platforms, the integrators like Orange Business Services, Equinix, etc., PricewaterhouseCoopers, all have invested a lot in security and in data governance. A lot of data scientists, governance people, who really make sure that from every entity, we make sure that it's robust for the future, because you're all dependent. It's one big system, and you all have to align.
Yeah.
And any cross-border dynamics within SVB?
Yes, of course. Our customer needs becoming more complex. One way that's happening is that people live more and more a few years, or work more and more a few years abroad, or having partners abroad, etc. So we do need data from other governments abroad, and it's a real challenge to gather them in time in order to in time execute our payments, etc. So that's an example of how our customer group is getting more and more in a complex situation, other family blends, etc. So that's on a European level being regulated, but in a very standardized way, not facing different country deliveries, challenges, etc.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've seen a couple of gain momentums also here, right, within new digital ecosystems. So let's look to Moody.
Digital has never been so ubiquitous. In the past 3 years, the amount of data in the world has grown by a factor of 3. In industry, transportation, distribution, services, cities, and healthcare. At Orange Business Services, we share the belief that data should serve human creativity. We connect your employees, locations, and objects all around the world. We collect and manage your data in secure clouds. We analyze it to help you make the right decisions. We protect it. We protect you. So that together, we create positive impact. For you, for society, and for the environment.
Right, I wanted to show you this because if you really talk about digital ecosystems, what will it bring us in the end, right? So the discussion at the one hand is we need to be secure, we need to be connected, but I hear a lot of discussions about the value side, right? So how many times do you see already, Gelmer, that digital ecosystems really change the operating models? Because that's an interesting one, right?
Yeah, that's the interesting one. I think, so we mentioned, I think, Philips at the start of the conversation as one where it really fundamentally changed the operating model. But there are quite a number in that research in many different industries. In construction, Komatsu, a Japanese construction equipment manufacturer, who really found out that digitizing their machines had no value because upstream and downstream they would experience the same hurdles. So they're looking now at a digital construction site where basically across the board and across partners they share that information. So you see it in medical, you see it in construction, you see it in technology companies, obviously. So I would say across the board, yeah, that is the new trend.
Right. And of course, I understand that there's also a lot of impact on organizational aspects here, right? So you brought a slide with you, and perhaps you can show that, because I wanted to elaborate a little on that for the remaining of the discussions also. So what are you trying to say here?
A couple of things, and I think some of the things on this slide we already touched upon, so let's not cover this, but I think the willingness to really get to know your partners in such an ecosystem. Connected a bit to the discussion we had on really being prepared to put value in, not just get it out. That's an important one. And I think the discussion also around two of the bottom things, always the naughty details, but some things you need to organize really on an ecosystem level. And I think the discussion around data and the discussion around security are two perfect examples. And those are quite tricky discussions to get right. But I think if you really want to get the value out of the ecosystem and want it to work, you need to be prepared to invest there.
Right.
That's key.
So if you look to the developments of maturity levels in ecosystems, how much can you still hold on do-it-yourself, for an example?
Well, and that's not our strategy, and it cannot be, because in technology development market will be better and faster, and we like to make usage of that, of course. What we always have to do ourselves is understanding our customers, understanding our regulations, and understanding our core business processes. So becoming better and better in that. And that's also a cross-functional thing. Huh? So not doing ourselves, but I think sharing with our ecosystem, with our partners, what we have to do, again, short-term, mid-term, long-term, what we try to achieve, what are the values of our business, and ourselves reinventing constantly our own business. I think that's what we have to do ourselves. That's why we're here. Hey? That's our
Purpose. Right.
purpose. Yeah.
So what does it mean if you hear Astrid talk, Orla, and then Dave? So not the horizons, but let's say the planning in 1 to 3 stages, in multiple years, right?
Yeah.
1, 3, 5, or
More over
more
10,
even 10. Huh?
Yeah.
So what does it mean for you in terms of flexibility, in adapting your propositions, in adapting your way to interact, right?
Well, I think, one of the things that we've done is we've just started to build out a channel and partner organization to really help try and formalize that and how you engage, which is very, very key. And starting to really understand, well, how will that work? How do you partner with other organizations to kind of extract that value, to bring that value, to help customers exactly like Astrid, right? Because it is, there's it's like the short term, but then the midterm and the long term. The value comes from being able to understand that vision, and if they understand it well themselves, they can help partners understand where they're going. And then you have time to actually organize around how do we bring that value together? Who can help bring that value together? And that's how sometimes even informally these mini ecosystems are formed just to create that value. And you see that happening a lot in the automotive industry as they, with autonomous vehicles. There are many examples of where partners come together to really deliver that value, because alone that's very difficult to do. But understanding that trajectory, understanding what it is that needs to be done, what is it that we need to build in order to help realize that vision, that takes time, it takes planning. And so understanding that from the customer's perspective, not just the short term, but the long-term vision is very key to actually maximizing the impact an ecosystem has on the objectives that a customer has.
It's almost inverting the focus, right? It's no longer about getting the functions to do it optimally, but it's like looking outside and seeing what you can do there. People find that hard?
I think everyone's at a different level of understanding that, because organizations like to have control. And when you are engaging with an ecosystem, sometimes you have to relinquish some control in order to get more back. So what I'm observing is that people understand well the concept of ecosystem and engaging that. I met with several partners here yesterday, and the ecosystem conversation was on everybody's mind. And then it becomes, how do you do that well? And sometimes you see that people are very open to that. Other times people need to understand, well, how do I control what I need to control? How do I relinquish control but still manage to achieve and report back to my organization in terms of metrics? So these are things that still I see at least, that we're working through as a sector and as an industry.
Yeah.
An old say is that if you cannot share, you cannot multiply, so something like that. By my old granddad, but something. Dave, same for you?
Yeah, I think what we did, we reinvented ourselves, which is kind of the buzzword of today, I think, to make sure that we have a different operating model for these customers. To really make sure that we are not only doing managed services, but also integration services because of what they need. But also invested a lot on the data part and the cybersecurity part, so that we can really talk about business outcomes, what the data has value for those customers. And before that, we couldn't have that conversation because we didn't have the right people in the organization. So we invested a lot on that side from Orange Business Services to make sure that we can have those business outcomes discussions, 1, 3, 5 years, and then see what kind of model we can bring to these customers to add the value. Right. So we did a lot of change ourselves.
And I think we see a lot actually within the industry. It's much more solution oriented now than it was perhaps 5, 10 years ago, where a lot of us were trying to just sell product. Now it's about selling those solutions, and that does require a very different kind of mindset. And so that's what you see also within, I think, all of our organizations. We're more projected now towards solutioning and solving problems that way, rather than just, a quick fix here, a quick fix here. So very much an evolution in the mindset within the industry itself.
Yeah, you see the evolution on point solutions to, let's say, end-to-end solutions.
Yeah.
The question I would love to ask there, Elmar, of course, is that we've seen that evolution in a certain way also in, let's say, the contracting, right? In the end, you need to do business with each other, so to speak. So we've seen capital investments going to OPEX, right? We've seen then licenses going into subscription, going into SaaS, going into PaaS, in these kind of services. What's next? Because in that 10 years frame, she does not have a real direction. I would have said a different word, but we're on telly.
It's an open data.
So that means also open kind of contracting, open kind of. How hard is that, for example, ecosystems? Well, you need to at least understand where your profit or loss will be, right? How does that conflict?
I think it will be quite hard, because if you think about integrated solutions, I mean, if we really mean that we want to put the client in the center of the experience and look at an end-to-end journey, that means that potentially you only deliver a part of that, and that your revenue should also come from that part of it, but that you're part of a bigger offering there. So I think thinking about that and getting that to work also in a model where the client is not burdened with all these partners collating that service, that is the next step.
Right. And how do you see that in terms of?
I see it as there's some complexity there. I think it's again probably an opportunity to evolve the ecosystem and the model even more. We do see a lot of companies kind of turning towards, and the research shows it as well, towards managed service providers, because that helps try to simplify a little bit the management of all of the various players that perhaps deliver on a solution. But that doesn't necessarily always solve the contracting issue that you're referring to. And I think that's going to take a little bit of time and creativity. I don't think we have the answer yet. We've got a few years to figure it out before Astrid gets there, but we have some work to do.
Right.
I think cloud models and subscriptions will be a big part of that. I think naturally cloud solutions are already oriented at one, scalability, and the other also standardized ways of integrating so that it's easier to connect the dots.
Yeah.
So we see some characteristics of that new, let's say, digital ecosystems, right? So what's still missing?
I think realizing that it's a continuous process. The steering on your short, midterm, long-term planning, we do know in an abstract way what we want in a long-term vision, but we cannot contract or plan upon those solutions because they are not there. looking at continuous improvement, continuous looking at reinvention, your business model, your customer needs, and prioritizing. I think it has a lot to do with what you said. It cannot be solution-driven anymore. It has to be solution-driven, not product-driven. We are getting, and I think it's a good thing, more demanding. It's not about doing a lot of things and hope you get at the right solution. We have scarcity of labor, we have scarcity of time, we have big customer needs, and we need to do the right things.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you convey that into, let's say, some leadership styles, so let's try to hook that up also. So Orla, what is needed? We're here at the table. I would say lay it on the table.
Yeah.
What do we need?
I think it is being able to articulate a vision of where you're going, and then it's about, I think, making sure that within that, it's got to be about trust, because everything we've talked about today hinges a lot on how much you trust your partner, how much do you trust your ecosystem, how much do your stakeholders trust you to deliver on the vision that you have. So I think also there's a strong need to show trust, and then be a co-creator of value. It's not enough just to be thinking about your own unique objectives, but if you're part of an ecosystem, you have to be adding positively to the ecosystem around you as well. So there is I guess there is a focus on your organization, but also the impact that you are having outside of your own organization. Right. So I think probably quite a unique leadership role for the future. And then I think we have to get very comfortable with ambiguity. We live in a very difficult time at the moment. We don't have the crystal ball for Astrid as to what things are going to look like in 10 years' time. So getting comfortable with ambiguity, getting comfortable with understanding that you probably won't solve all the issues on your own, but if you surround yourself with the right partners, you can create a new way of doing things. But getting comfortable with the ambiguity, because I think that's here to stay.
Right. So, and if you bring that, Kelmer, in the perspective of that leadership from trust, is there trust in the boards? Do you see that? Or is it just a discussion about the value? There's the trust. Or is it the trust in the leadership, what we today would require?
It starts from the value, but you can only succeed in the long term if that trust comes with that. I do think there are quite some challenges in leadership now. On the one hand, you have to be very strategic. On the other hand, you have to be able to execute very effectively. How to balance that? You have to embrace ambiguity, but you have to set a very clear direction. You have to drive technology, but also be human-centric. So I think for leaders, it's quite challenging to find your balance in all of these yin-yangs or balancing skills.
Right. So how do you handle that, Dave? So you made a turn as OBS, for example, also within that purpose-led discussion, previously led by Helmut, right?
Yeah.
So suddenly you're not product pushing, you're solution selling in terms of listening to customers. Big change, right? So how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's a big change. It's I think for us to do that is that we had the vision, of course, which I think you said quite. That's essential to have a right vision. But then it's about getting there, and I think that has to do with setting the path and showing examples for people. Make sure you get new talent in. Look at people's skills, look at it in a different way. I think at Orange Business Services, we try to do all of those together. And I think if it's not only about vision, not only about technology, it's all about making those steps on cultural perspective as well. And if you balance that out, then you see the small steps. I think, as Astrid said, if you make small steps, then people think, hey, we can do this. And then you get trust in the organization, then the leadership comes in, and then you can accelerate.
So milestones. Right. Right. So if I would ask you to do that one magic thing, what you would advise your peers, your digital leader peers, right? So what would it be? Let me start with Orla.
Well, I would say embrace the power of the ecosystem. And yes, it will be challenging, but the value to be had from leveraging the power of the ecosystem is immense. And so not to fear that, but actually to embrace it.
Leveraging the power of the ecosystem. Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I think fair point. I think opening up and really understanding the value instead of finding it out yourself. But I think it's a harsh one to do because we want to talk about business outcomes. We want to be there for our customers, but I think it's difficult as we are today. So that would be the case. How can they really trust us? And we can provide on that trust to really show that we can talk business outcomes and not say, hey, can you do this for us? But really, what's your outcome? And having that conversation. I think if customers would more open up on that case, will be there to help them, I think.
Right. So if you really steer on the output, you don't have to have a blame and shame during the throughput, so to speak.
No, and I think, and we can also customize then what the really need is instead of saying, hey, these are the list of requirements, can you do that? So it's not really understanding what's behind it. And I think if we could have these customizations more and more, then I think, we could be a better place for them.
Right. Gelmer. The one we are dying for.
The one we're dying for. I think it has been on the table already. For me, it would be that heightened awareness of what are the problems that we really need to solve today and going forward. Connecting the story to that. I think if I look at the highlights of these discussions, it's getting that right. And I think ecosystems can really speed up growth if you have that discussion right. If you resolve some of the tricky topics we discussed, but then on an ecosystem level, and if you find your own way with that in terms of leadership style, I think that's the power of 3 here.
Right, the power of 3. Thanks. And of course, last but certainly not least, Astrid, what will be your advice to your peers?
Well, I think 3 things. We've said it before, stay on value and be specific. Learn to be more and more specific, exploring. Organize in that way, in value streams. Offer your employees, teams, etc., to develop their core competencies, adding value, facing value. And I like what you said, don't be afraid of the ambiguity. I would say embrace it and explore it. Yeah. Look for evidence, look for small steps. Take the steps now to challenge the problems in 10 years. Yeah.
Right.
In 10 years.
Thank you very much. So, Gelmer, to end up, did we hit the topic?
I think we did.
We did. So no remarks left.
No, I would say in the end, well, maybe to summarize this, the business strategy can be as good, but if you don't manage to connect that to a technology and data strategy, chances of failing are big.
Right.
So,
right. Thank you.
That's to do.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the guests, of course, at the table for this fine discussion. Next edition, next episode will be on the digital edge, right? Yeah, you need to follow this. So what does it mean for now? Stay safe, stay healthy.
Every connection, every link, every purchase, every update, download, trade, refresh, every yes, I'm still watching, and turn left here. Equinix is everywhere. As the world's digital infrastructure company, we connect places, partners, and possibilities. They all come together on Platform Equinix. Harnessed by the world's digital leaders, our global interconnected ecosystem is ready to power your success. With a physical and virtual infrastructure that adapts as your business transforms, you can unlock new opportunities and stay secure and connected across the most dynamic industries. You lead the way, we cut the lag. No buffer between start here and go anywhere. And with every leap forward, we look ahead to do better, in service to our communities, to our team, and to our customers. Together, we enable the innovations that enrich our work life, and planet. Equinix.